Welcome back to another episode of Lost Codex Legends. My name is Jesse, and today we're talking about one particular lady on the Horde side who's been rather important, not only in terms of the female representation on the Horde side, but also for her people and the direction that her people have gone in. I'm of course talking about the Lady of Light, the matron of the Blood Knights, Lady Liadrin. Now without further ado, let's talk Liadrin. Like most fictional characters, Lady Liadrin was orphaned at a young age. Her parents were killed by Amani trolls, giving her this deep-seething hatred for their kind. Not that Blood Elves really needed a reason to hate them, but, she had another reason, because her parents were killed by them. So, she grew up hating trolls. She was raised by a man named Vandalor, a high priest of Silvermoon, whose tutelage led to her passion and interest in the light, and eventually led to her becoming a priestess. Many years later, after Liadrin had become a priestess, she accompanied Magister Darkon Drathir and her apprentice Galel into the forests of Eversong to investigate a malfunctioning runestone which was meant to keep her and her people and their land safe. It was during this expedition that her party was ambushed and captured by Amani trolls, where she came face to face with Zul'jin herself. Prior to this ambush, in a totally separate attack, Lorthamar Theron had also been ambushed, and funny enough, this is where she meets him for the first time as a prisoner of the Amani trolls. Now, Zul'jin, of course, interrogates the elves as he's fascinated and interested in how these runestones work for the defenses of Silvermoon. During this time, Galel, her apprentice, breaks free and distracts Zul'jin, and in order to save him, Liadrin channels the light so that her pain that she's feeling is mirrored back onto Zul'jin. This enables them being the four elves, the opportunity to escape, and Darkon Drathir teleports them all to safety. There was a point in time when the elves were kidnapped by the trolls where they were put under some sort of mojo spell, pacifying potion of some kind, and Liadrin receives several visions of her three companions. The first vision she receives is of Darkon, and she sees him as this reanimated corpse, something disgusting, something she'd never seen before. When she gets a vision of her apprentice Galel, he is in this twisted, deformed state, and when she sees the vision of Lorthamar, she sees him writhing in a cloud of flames. Of course, because they all escaped and survived this ordeal, they all become good friends, Lorthamar Theron, Galel, Liadrin, and Darkon Drathir. Liadrin goes on to witness and attend many high-ranking ceremonies for the High Elves of Silvermoon, including Lorthamar's promotion, two of his promotions, to Ranger Captain and later Ranger Lord. Darkon and Galel were also present at these ceremonies. It's later during the Second War that Liadrin gets to have some revenge on Zul'jin after he's kidnapped by Haldoran Brightwing. This is when Zul'jin's eye is taken, and of course, during this time, Liadrin actually notes that the amount that they're torturing them, they should just put him out of his misery, because the elves are being quite vicious to him, as the Amani trolls are quite vicious to them. And Liadrin advocates for ending Zul'jin's life, but of course that doesn't happen as a bunch of Amani trolls attack, thus allowing Zul'jin to cut off his own arm and escape into the woods with his fellow trolls. Years later, things are going great for Liadrin during the Third War. She is now High Priestess of Silvermoon, she's happy, she's looking back on the past, and everything's going well. She notes that, there's some troubling reports coming from the human kingdoms and all that, and she notes that in hindsight, it's probably a good thing that the elves distance themselves from the humans, and of course, all good things come to a crashing halt during this time. Things start to go wrong when the King of Silvermoon's health begins to fade. The guy is old. The guy's, quite an old king. And he's receiving reports from the south and is troubled about something. But Liadrin's not within his inner court, so of course she doesn't know specifically what, but reports are coming in from the southern human kingdoms. That troubling reports comes in the form of Arthas Menethil knocking at the door with a whole undead army, saying, "Hey, I need that Sunwell, but in exchange, I'll give you guys, eternal life in the form of undeath." Naturally, the elves refuse, and so begins the siege of Quel'Thalas, and the scourge begins to run rampant through the lands of the elves. Of course, as Arthas attacks the elven lands, the shield that protects Silvermoon is brought down by Darkon Drathir's betrayal, a close personal friend of Liadrin, As Arthas Menethil marches on Silvermoon directly, Liadrin witnesses the fate of Sylvanas Windrunner, the former Ranger General of Silvermoon. She sees her undead ghostly visage being paraded before the walls of Silvermoon, just as Arthas and his Scourge forces attack. Although she is disturbed and horrified, Liadrin holds her resolve and continues to heal the wounded and aid those defenders against the Scourge. As the defense of Silvermoon is crumbling, Arthas Menethil engages with Grand Magister Bellovere directly and actually doesn't kill him, but mortally wounds him, totally mauls him with Frostmourne and just casts him aside. During this time, Liadrin's foster father, the man who taught her all about the light and raised her as a priest, rushes forward to help Bellovere as Liadrin watches Arthas fight King Anastarion, this legendary battle between Frostmourne and Philo Malorn, and as she's watching, her foster father, Vendalor, is ripped apart by an abomination and is unable to get to Bellovere in time. Bellovere, who is grievously wounded by Frostmourne, having just watched his friend, the High Priest of Silvermoon, now die, promised Vendalor that he would protect Liadrin, and his final act is teleporting Liadrin to safety moments before he's ripped apart by Scourge as well. Liadrin is far away when the Sunwell is completely tainted by Arthas and the resurrection of Kel'Thuzad, and it's during this time that Liadrin begins to break down. She is unable to call upon the light. Panic and grief are ripping at her. Survivor's guilt is now there. Everyone she knew, from the man who raised her to the Grand Magister, High King, Sunstrider himself, Sylvanas Windrunner, all these legendary characters have fallen all around her. Thousands of elves are dead, and she is unable to call upon the light. Not because of the Sunwell. She knows that she can still call upon the light without the Sunwell, but she's unable to do it. She's unable to call upon any sort of powers of healing, anything that she had been taught, and this scares the absolute hell out of Liadrin. Now later on, as Kael'thas is preparing to strike out at the corrupted, tainted Sunwell, Liadrin has now refused to call upon the light. She knows that she can't call upon it, and the light, she's having trouble connecting to it. But now she feels she doesn't deserve that connection. Now she is so racked with guilt and pain that she has completely abandoned the light. She refuses to call on it. She's not worthy in her mind. She is not able or worthy enough to call upon this power. Instead of picking up a staff as a high priestess, instead she picks up a weapon, a truncheon instead. And although she doesn't really know how to use it, she asks Lorthamar's men to teach her how to use this. She wants to volunteer for this attack to help Kael'thas against the Scourge at the Sunwell, and also against Amani Trolls, because apparently Amani Trolls are just being a bunch of dicks and also attacking the Sunwell at the same time. And so she gets taught how to use this weapon. She's no longer a priest. Liadrin is now a warrior, and she's felt that the light has abandoned her, so she's abandoned the light. She is not worthy of calling upon it, and she goes in hand with a melee weapon in hand instead of holy magic. During the strike force on Quel'Danas, Liadrin comes face to face with an undead version of her foster father, Vendalar, and of course is forced to put him down. After the battle, after the tainted Sunwell has been destroyed, Kael'thas proclaims that they are no longer High Elves, but they are now Blood Elves. And at this point, Liadrin's story continues, unfortunately, to go downhill. And for the next 5 years, Liadrin struggles. Liadrin wanders her lands, helping rebuild and helping her people get back on their feet, but she is feeling guilt as she cannot connect to the light, and she's feeling vengeful and angry. And without the light, her struggles with arcane addiction is hitting hard. Liadrin spends much of her time south of the Eversong border hunting Scourge, and specifically hunting Darkon Drathir, her former friend with his stupid hat, because it's because of him and his betrayal that Arthas was able to do so much damage in Silvermoon. Liadrin is angry, Liadrin is without the light, and Liadrin is vengeful. During this time, as she roams the land as a warrior, crushing the skulls of all these Scourge minions and undead monstrosities, she receives small little arcane gifts and arcane objects to still her addiction by an anonymous source, and she has a feeling she knows who it is. She thinks it's her former apprentice Galel, who's in hiding. He's hiding his identity. But in truth, it's actually Lorthamar giving her these gifts, who Lorthamar over the years, has some affection for Liadrin. After some time, Liadrin was summoned to Silvermoon, and she's completely astonished to find it's been entirely reclaimed. She has been so focused on rebuilding the outer parts of Eversong rather, and being south of the border, that I guess she had no idea what was going on in the capital city itself, and she returns to find it almost back to normal, aside from the giant scar that's right through the middle. The other part, the eastern part of the city, is definitely more intact than she anticipated. As Liadrin's taken to the royal palace, she meets the newly promoted Grand Magister Romath, who gives her an interesting proposition. Prince Kael'thas and his new alliance of Naga and allying with Illidan Stormrage. By the way, Liadrin is one of the few who really know about that. Not many do, but she is one of the few. Kael'thas has sent back a present, a postcard from Outland. Says, "Wish you were here, here's Anaru," and sends Muru, I guess in a box, back to Silvermoon to help the elves with their magical addictions. Says, "Here, drain the life force out of this. Eat this. This'll help." Thanks, Kael'thas. But Romath has a better idea. Romath and several other magisters have the idea, instead of using it as a magical source of energy for their people to just have a total chow-down feast on, they want to use it as a conductor for the light, because they are aware it is a holy creature, and Romath has an idea. Romath tells Liadrin that her life has been led by extremities. On one side, she was a devout priestess of the light, wielding a staff and healing the sick and healing the wounded. But since then, she has picked up a massive war maul, a truncheon, and she's just roaming the land, stomping around in plate armor and just crushing the skulls of the Scourge. There's been two total polar opposites here, and Romath says, "What if you can be both?" Romath hands her the blood-tempered Ransur, the iconic Blood Elf Paladin Spear that Blood Elf players get in-game at level 20, and tells her that this is the balance between both paths. It's both the familiarity of a staff that she once wielded, but far more elegant than the traditional war maul that she's been wielding and running around and killing Scourge with. He introduces Liadrin to the captured Muru, and Liadrin forges the link with the being. When Liadrin channels the light out of Muru, there's no warmth and there's no love, but there is power, and she feels that power. And now Liadrin feels different. There's something coming from this creature that she feels, why be a slave to something when you can be the master of it, right? And Liadrin, that's exactly what Liadrin's feeling. From Muru, there is power, but this power comes at a price. If not at a moral cost, because, of course, this is a divine, holy creature. They're well aware that it's holy, and there's definitely some morality issue in terms of draining the life essence of this seemingly pure, calm... Now, before anyone here watches this and rolls their eyes and goes, "But the light is evil," and all this stuff, remember, when you're near a Naru, the Naru presence is calming. The Naru presence, it sings a symphony of hope. As Chronicle says, it sings this song of warmth and hopefulness. Naru, there is a side to the Naru, and I'm not going to dispute that, but the pure elegance of their song, that sort of wind-chimey sound we hear in-game, is meant to invoke this radiation of purity and hopefulness and calmness. And they know that this is a holy creature, and yet they're still siphoning their power from it. So there is a morality issue there. We're not going to talk about the morality of the Naru. We're just going to be talking about using this living creature as a conduit for power. But if the cost of this power isn't a moral cost, then it's definitely a physical one, as there is a physical, almost mental aspect going on here. There's a battle. It is physically draining on you. It is physically inflicting on you. And there's definitely mental attributes going on between the Blood Knight in particular and Muru himself, themself. It's a Naru. There's a lot going on there when you're draining that, and there's definitely a toll to be taken. Whatever the cost she is paying, physical, mental, moral, Liadrin forges a link with Muru. Liadrin reconnects with the light via forceful means and infuses her power with Muru's power. And in doing so, Liadrin becomes the first of the Blood Knights of the Blood Elves. Liadrin becomes the Blood Elf matriarch and forges this new order with a new vision. instead of serving the light, they're going to master it. Why be a servant when you can control it? And a little bit of dark shamanism style thinking going on there. This results in a rather cold relationship with the light, and it actually gets a lot of dirty looks from the some of the population of Silvermoon. Remember, these elves, you know, some of them, not all of them, many of them, may have had a connection with the light in some way. And now, despite everything that's happened, and now these Blood Knights are physically draining this holy, divine, pure creature of its essence, of its power, to gain access to the light again. But it's not a warm, loving connection. It's a forced upon. And the elves of Silvermoon, some of the elves definitely look at the Blood Knights with scorn and shake their head. They're not angry. They're just disappointed. Liadrin's old friend and apprentice Galel joins the Blood Knights, and Liadrin lets him, but says, you know, you gotta obey every command I give you. This isn't gonna be easy. Just so you know. After this, several things happen all at once. Lorthamar starts negotiating with the Horde, and Liadrin tries to keep an open mind. She goes, yeah, you know what? They did burn down our forests in the Second War and kill a lot of people. And they have trolls in them. That's horrifying. And they've got undead, and that's even more scary. But, you know, we need allies, and the Alliance are a bunch of dicks right now. And she's a little bit cautious about Sylvanas, because she wonders if the Sylvanas Windrunner of the Forsaken, is that the same Sylvanas Windrunner that died protecting Silvermoon? Is it? Liadrin wonders. Liadrin's been asking the right questions from the very beginning. During this time, as Lorthamar is negotiating with the Horde, there are rumors going around at Darkon Drathir's old residence. There's scourge activity going around. There's movement there. No one really knows what's going on. In addition to this, there's also news of someone looking for 3 stones of power that were formed and created by Grand Magister Bellavir a million years ago, and Liadrin assumes whoever's looking for these stones clearly believes that they can contest the scourge, and thus they set off to look for these stones and to see what's going on. All while this is happening, Liadrin's friend Galel is having a bad time. The mana addiction is hitting him hard. Muru's connection, mental connection, that's not going around. You've got addiction, you've got withdrawal, you've got this mental battle going on. Galel is not having a good time, and things are going wrong. He actually ends up murdering the dealer, the one who gives him his magical substance to sate his addiction. He ends up killing his dealer in this fit of paranoid rage insanity, despite being a Blood Knight in Liadrin's group. All these things come together as the Blood Knights start to lay a trap for Darkon Drathir in his residence, but turns out it's a trap set for them. The Lich King wants the